Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end. Heidi-ho!
Child's Play wasn't just a movie. It was a Trojan horse, a gleeful satire on 80s consumerism smuggled into cinemas inside the plastic shell of a talking doll. But behind the pint-sized overalls and the gleam of a kitchen knife, it was a film born from a creative war, a story so radically transformed it barely resembled its own dark birth. Before the cameras rolled, its creator envisioned a psychological thriller about a boy's murderous rage, where the doll was just a symptom of the sickness. The voice of the monster it created was almost that of a famous TV mom, and the man inside the suit was a hero from another horror classic. And the violence, it ignited a moral panic, with critics blaming a toy for the sins of the real world. These are 20 weird facts about Child's Play, a film that asks what happens when the things we buy want to own us back, and proves that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that come in a box, batteries included. Wanna play? Number 20, The Blood Buddy. Before he was Chucky, the killer doll was named Buddy, and the film wasn't called Child's Play. Writer Don Mancini's original script was titled Blood Buddy. The story was a dark psychological thriller and a satire on marketing to children. The studio, however, felt the title was too generic and on the nose. During production, it was briefly changed to the even more bizarre title, Batteries Not Included, until they discovered that Steven Spielberg was already producing a film with that exact name. Finally, they landed on the elegantly simple and menacing title Child's Play, a perfect, ironic twist on the innocence the film was about to slaughter. Number 19, The Real-Life Buddy. Good Guy doll's design, with its cheerful overalls, striped shirt, and friendly face, was not a random creation. It was a direct and deliberate parody of Hasbro's popular My Buddy dolls from the mid-1980s. These dolls were marketed with a catchy jingle and were designed to be a boy's best friend. The filmmakers tapped into this specific cultural touchstone, twisting the wholesome image of a beloved toy into a vessel for pure evil. The satire was so pointed that it's impossible to look at a real My Buddy doll today without a slight shiver of recognition. Number 18, Hiding the Monster. In a brilliant piece of marketing, the initial theatrical trailers for Child's Play were cut to completely hide the film's premise. The ads presented the movie as a mystery, focusing on the terrified mother and child, showing strange accidents happening around the house, and never once revealing that the doll was the killer. All the audience saw were quick, fleeting glimpses of Chucky, leaving them to wonder if Andy was the killer or if the mother was going insane. This strategy built incredible suspense and ensured that when audiences finally saw Chucky move and speak on his own, the shock was genuine and terrifying. Number 17, Attack of the Cabbage Patch Kids. While My Buddy provided the look, the film's satirical soul was fueled by the Cabbage Patch Kids craze that swept America in the mid-80s. Writer Don Mancini was fascinated and horrified by the consumer hysteria, where parents were literally fighting each other in store aisles to get their hands on the popular dolls. He saw this phenomenon as a perfect metaphor for the dark side of advertising and its effect on children. Child's Play was conceived as a direct response to this craze, a horror film that asked, what if the thing you were willing to trample someone for actually wanted to kill you? Number 16, the original curse was a blood oath. In Don Mancini's original Blood Buddy script, the doll's animation wasn't the result of voodoo. The story was much more of a psychological thriller. In that version, the doll was designed to have synthetic blood, and if a child mixed their own blood with the doll's, it would come to life, forming a blood bond. This living doll would then act out the child's subconscious, repressed rage. If the boy, Andy, felt angry at his babysitter, the doll would manifest that anger and kill her. This made the doll a direct extension of the child's psyche, a much different and more ambiguous form of horror. Number 15, Let's Do the Voodoo. It was director Tom Holland who completely changed the killer doll's origin story. A veteran of the horror genre who had just directed the vampire classic Fright Night, Holland felt that the Blood Buddy concept was too vague and difficult to explain on screen. He wanted a more concrete supernatural hook that audiences could immediately grasp. Drawing on the popularity of voodoo lore in 80s cinema, he rewrote the opening, creating the character of Charles Lee Ray and the idea of a soul-transferring ritual. This single change transformed the film from a psychological thriller into a full-blown supernatural slasher. Number 14, The Voice of Lucille Bluth.
And who the hell is Martha Stewart?
My idol. And what does Martha tell you to do when guests drop by for dinner and you haven't had time to shop? You improvise.
Brad Dourif's menacing rasp is now inseparable from Chucky, but he was not the first actor to voice the part. In a bizarre piece of casting history, all of Chucky's lines were originally recorded by veteran actress Jessica Walter. best known for her iconic role as the manipulative matriarch Lucille Bluth in Arrested Development. Director Tom Holland had used her as a temporary reader for the puppet during filming to give the actors something to react to. He liked her performance so much that he kept it in the initial cut of the film. However, test audiences felt her voice, while creepy, simply wasn't scary enough. The decision was made to recast, and all of Walter's dialogue was ultimately wiped and re-recorded. Number 13, The Chant of the Soul. The famous voodoo chant that Charles Lee Ray uses to transfer his soul into the doll. Adedu Dambala. Sounds ancient and authentic, but it's mostly gibberish. It was invented for the film, though it does incorporate the name of Dambala, a powerful serpent spirit in the Haitian Vodou religion. One of the film's producers, David Kirshner, later jokingly claimed the chant translated to, "Hear me, O mighty one in this land and in the next, and grant me this one wish. I wish for a long-lasting and successful franchise, so I can buy a mansion in Beverly Hills." Number 12, The Fire on Set. During the film's climax, Andy sets Chucky on fire in the fireplace. This pyrotechnic-heavy scene almost had a real-life disastrous ending. The studio where they were filming, Culver Studios, was a historic landmark filled with old, flammable wooden structures. One of the fire effects malfunctioned, and a real, uncontrolled fire broke out on the set. The entire soundstage came dangerously close to burning to the ground. Thankfully, the crew was able to extinguish the blaze before it caused catastrophic damage. But it was a moment where the film's horror nearly became all too real. Number 11, The Test Screening Terror. During an early test screening, the filmmakers knew they had a hit on their hands thanks to the visceral reaction of one specific audience member. A large, tough-looking man, who had been sitting stone-faced for the first half of the film, completely lost his composure during the scene where Chucky, believed to be dead, suddenly springs to life and attacks the detective. The man reportedly screamed, jumped out of his seat, and fled the theater in terror, leaving his wife behind. It was at that moment the producers knew their little doll was genuinely terrifying. Number 10, A Killer Connection. The woman who played Andy's mother, Catherine Hicks, ended up marrying the man who created her on-screen tormentor. She met special effects artist Kevin Yagher on the set of Child's Play. Yagher was the brilliant designer and puppeteer who led the team that brought Chucky to life. The two hit it off during the grueling production, fell in love, and were married in 1990. They are still together to this day, a loving relationship forged in the fires of animatronic horror. Number 9, The Dream That Was Cut. A significant sequence was filmed, but ultimately cut from the final movie that would have added another layer to the psychological horror. In the deleted scene, Andy falls asleep and has a nightmare where his own mother is Chucky's next victim. The dream featured a POV shot from inside Chucky's head as he stalked Corinne Barclay, ending with the doll's hands wrapping around her throat. While the scene was deemed too intense and perhaps confusing, it would have further blurred the line between Andy's fears and the film's reality. Number 8, The Scrapped Meltdown. The film's iconic ending, where Chucky is burned, decapitated, and shot through the heart, was not the original plan. In the initial version of the script, the finale was much smaller. After being burned in the fireplace, Chucky was supposed to melt into a gruesome, molten pile of plastic. However, the effects team realized that creating a convincing melting effect would be incredibly difficult and expensive. The decision was made to go with a more traditional slasher movie dismemberment, giving the film its now famous, over-the-top explosive climax. Number 7, The Man in the Mask. While animatronics did much of the heavy lifting, many of Chucky's most dynamic movements were performed by a real person. Actor Ed Gale, who was 34 tall, was hired to wear a specially designed Chucky costume for scenes that required complex actions like running, falling, or being set on fire. Gale, who is also known for playing one of the Dink clowns in Spaceballs and the titular role in Howard the Duck, inside the suit, provided the crucial human element that made Chucky's movements feel truly alive and unsettling. Number 6, The Puppet Masters. Bringing the animatronic Chucky to life was a monumental task that often required a small army of technicians. For a single scene, it could take up to 11 puppeteers to operate the doll. Different operators would be responsible for different parts, one for the eyes, one for the brows, one for the lips, and so on. The lead puppeteer, Kevin Yagher, would often control Chucky's main facial expressions via a remote rig that allowed him to mimic the expressions on his own face. It was a complex, high-tech symphony of puppetry that pushed the boundaries of practical effects at the time. Number 5, The Real Haunted Doll. While the Cabbage Patch Kids inspired the satire, the core concept of a haunted doll may have a much older, real-life inspiration: Robert the Doll. Robert is an early 20th century doll, allegedly possessed by a malevolent spirit, that is now housed in a museum in Key West, Florida. The legend surrounding Robert includes stories of the doll moving on its own, giggling, and causing misfortune to anyone who disrespects it. While Don Mancini has never confirmed a direct link, the parallels between the legend of Robert and the story of Chucky are so uncanny that many horror fans believe it to be the true, dark source of the idea. Number 4. The voice of Isaac. Before Brad Dourif was hired, another iconic horror actor very nearly became the voice of Chucky. John Franklin, the actor who memorably played the creepy child preacher Isaac in Children of the Corn, was brought in to record dialogue. His high-pitched, sinister voice seemed like a natural fit for a killer toy. However, the filmmakers ultimately decided they wanted a deeper, more adult-sounding voice to create a disturbing contrast with the doll's innocent appearance. Franklin's voice was scrapped, and the role was given to Dourif, whose performance would become legendary. Number 3. The Method of Madness. Actor Brad Dourif, a respected character actor known for his Oscar-nominated role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, developed a unique and intense method for recording Chucky's lines. He would run around the recording studio until he was physically out of breath before delivering his lines, giving Chucky's voice its distinctive, frantic, and breathless quality. He also ad-libbed many of the character's most famous profanity-laced insults. Dourif would continue this physically demanding process for every sequel, cementing his reputation as the definitive and irreplaceable soul of the killer doll. Number 2. A Trinity of Killers. The full name of the killer who possesses the doll, Charles Lee Ray, is not random. It's a sinister tribute to 3 of the most infamous criminals in modern history. Charles comes from Charles Manson, the notorious cult leader. Lee comes from Lee Harvey Oswald, the assassin of President John F. Kennedy. And Ray comes from James Earl Ray, the man who assassinated Martin Luther King Jr. By combining these names, the filmmakers created a new, fictional serial killer who was literally born from the legacy of real-world evil. Number 1. The Boy Was the Killer. The single biggest secret behind Child's Play is that in its original conception, Chucky wasn't the killer, Andy was. In Don Mancini's Blood Buddy script, the doll was a manifestation of the lonely, fatherless boy's id Andy, feeling angry and abandoned, would enter a dissociative state, and the Blood Buddy doll would act out his murderous rage. The film was intended to be an ambiguous whodunit. Is the doll really alive, or is this sweet little boy a budding psychopath? The studio and director Tom Holland felt this was too dark and complex. They demanded a rewrite, transforming the story from a psychological exploration of a child's fractured mind into the straightforward supernatural slasher we know today. The original sin of the franchise is that the monster was never supposed to be the doll, but the little boy who played with it. And there you have it. The doll was never just a doll. What movie's twisted history should we unbox next? Leave your suggestions in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into darkness.